Hi, welcome to another episode of the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm Steve Richardson, a bankruptcy attorney trying to keep people on their path to financial stability and independence through education. Young people starting out, especially young families, need to have a good handle on their finances in order to reach and maintain financial freedom. They need to spend below their means and save for short term and long term goals. To talk about the importance of doing this and his new book that discusses how to do this, I talked to financial planner and previous guest Joe Okaly to get the solutions you need to succeed. My guest today is Joe Okaly, a repeat offender, having been on episode 144 of the podcast to talk about how young families can achieve financial freedom. He's the owner of New Horizons Wealth Management. He's a husband, father, and a coach. Helping as many middle class families as possible is the goal for all his combined ventures, whether it's be through advising traditional clients, producing podcasts, authoring books, or producing online resources. His goal for the future is to help over 100,000 middle class families to make their lives more enjoyable by removing financial anxiety and uncertainty through financial education resources. A lot of what I do on this podcast. So, welcome back to the show, Joe.
Thanks so much for having me, Steve. I appreciate it.
Great. So, as I said, you're back in episode 144. We were talking about this before I hit record. It's been a few years ago, uh, and but you since then, since you were on the show, you wrote a book. I hear, which is the Financial Pinwheel: Building Your Perpetual Financial Energy Machine. I got to tell you, that's a clever, catchy little title. What exactly is a financial pinwheel?
Sure. You may have seen this before as well with people, but finances aren't always the most interesting topic for a lot of people. And that's because they can be a little bit intimidating. They can be a little bit unknowns that go along with that. But stories, on the other hand, are really interesting. People really gravitate towards stories. So I wanted to create an analogy, something that was not intimidating, that was simple to understand, that people could really lean into and feel better about themselves because they have all these different pieces swirling about. I wanted to help them combine them together in a way, again, that was easy to understand and not intimidating. And so that's why I created an analogy to go along with this book, The Financial Pinwheel. And the financial pinwheel, very simply, is your lifestyle expenses. And if you have your pinwheel spinning, that means you're meeting your lifestyle expense needs. So we all
Mhm.
have financial energy that we create, and we use that financial energy to spin that pinwheel, that lifestyle that we want to live. Now, some people might have, three houses and four cars, and their pinwheel's a lot larger than maybe some other people's out there. And so it's not about having a big pinwheel or a small pinwheel. It's understanding that relationship of the financial energy that we're creating, because we can't just use our financial energy to solely power our pinwheel. At some point, we got to start capturing some of it, saving some of it, building up for the future, so that when we stop working, when we stop creating financial energy through working, we have enough resources put aside to spin that pinwheel perpetually for us down the road.
So, to use your analogy, talking about you have this financial energy, which is the wind,
You
or
got
you
it.
sort of blowing on that pinwheel. But of course, the bigger the pinwheel, the harder that wind has to blow to keep it going the same speed.
Exactly. Yes,
So
absolutely.
you get that idea of having it spin and getting it up to a certain speed. So it's not so much, how hard the wind is blowing, but how fast the pinwheel is spinning.
Right.
Because you have the, your if that pinwheel is, if I understand your analogy correctly, you have to, if you, it's like getting, how fast can you get your car from 0 to 60? How fast can you get the wind going? How fast and how long will it take for that pinwheel to spin fast enough to cover all of your lifestyle expenses, right?
Yeah, and I mean the thing is that it's an intentional decision. We get to choose how big our pinwheel is, and a lot of times we're just defaulted to, hey, we have more financial energy. Hey, let's buy some more stuff. Let's make our pinwheel a little bit bigger. And if we're not taking the time to see how these things relate to each other, then we're not going to always make the decisions that are in our best interest down the road.
Yeah, because you can have what one of my other guests, I believe he called it lifestyle creep or something else, where
Mhm.
your income gets larger and larger as your career goes along, as you get raises, and your income increases faster than inflation, get promotions, and as more money comes in, more money tends to go out. You spend, whatever comes in, and you're not really thinking intentionally, right, about that pinwheel or how fast the wind is. That you're saying, "Hey, wait a minute, maybe I don't have to spend um, as much money as is coming in. Maybe there are other longer term purposes for it." So it's more. So really, that wind or how fast you're blowing, as it were, uh, contributes more than just the speed of that pinwheel as it goes around, right? So to continue and not to belabor the analogy, but when you start getting into long term savings or an emergency fund or things like that that don't go into your lifestyle expenses, how does that relate to the pinwheel?
Sure. No, great question. So the pinwheel is made of different parts. And so when we capture some of that financial energy and we put it aside for later, what we're doing is we're putting it into our financial battery. And our financial battery is what we're going to rely on down the road so that we can switch that battery on down the road to power the pinwheel for us. And we don't need to use the energy from our income, the energy from working to power it instead. And so, just like any other battery, it has different cells for how you build it. So, like you said, emergency fund is part of that, but it goes through simplifying how those pieces come together and building a battery that makes sense for you to handle short term, intermediate term, and long term needs that you might have.
Yeah, perhaps a parallel analogy to a windmill where you're looking about renewable energy, and that's the whole thing that we're struggling with now with renewable energy and wind power, is that as long as that windmill is spinning, you have power, but what happens when it's not spinning anymore?
Right. And unless people
It's
want to
just
work
like,
forever.
right. You don't want to work forever. You want to have a plan for unexpected expenses or job loss or that sort of thing. And I think that battery analogy works well uh, in parallel with a pinwheel or a windmill, where some of that energy is going into the battery, and the rest of it is keeping the pinwheel spinning. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So you wrote this book. Who's your audience? Who is this book written for?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been an advisor now, a financial advisor for 17 years, and my practice works specifically with middle class families, which is a
Hmm.
little bit unique from how a lot of practices are set up. And so I came from middle class roots. I consider myself to be a middle class person. And so those are the people I want to help. I always say, kind of helping somebody get a second yacht isn't super fulfilling. Helping someone get to where they want to go for the goals in their life, like real life things, that really makes me feel great. So that's who I focus on. And while I love what I do individually, one on one with the people I work with in my practice, that's not plausible to help 100,000 people in that way. There's only so much time in the day. And so we look, what I wanted to do is develop resources that could scale, that could help, 100,000 people or more. We have over 100 million American families here. If I could help 100,000 of them, that'd be phenomenal. So how do I create resources for the middle class family to help them in doing some of these things that they weren't taught about in school, that they didn't get the education on, that they might find intimidating? How can I present this to them in a way that they can consume it and make better actions for themselves going forward and therefore have a happier life?
So the book is really an extension of your financial um, advisory practice, right? It's to help the people that maybe can't come in to see you, or just too far away, or you just can't scale your own business to handle that kind of load. So that the book acts as an extension of what you do, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it has it takes the concepts of what I do and it packages it in a way that people can self teach themselves the concept through the book and through the additional resources that I've developed.
Mm-hmm. Well, that plays right into my next question, which is, let's say one of my listeners wants to read your book. How does this book help them? Step us through what the book talks about and how it helps people.
Sure. Yeah. Because it definitely needs to help people if it's going to be out there doing some good in the world. So if your listeners are like most people, and they may be surprised to hear this, most people don't have a great grasp on all these different pieces that are floating around in their financial lives. They might
Mhm.
think, oh, it's probably just me. It's not. It's pretty much everyone, because nobody was taught in school how to manage these different components, even though we all grow up and we have jobs. So they might say, hey, I have a 401k. I think I have some life insurance. I know my salary. I'm not even sure what my wife makes exactly. So I have all these different floating of pieces out there. How do you package all those together in a way that follows a simple system that they can gain something material out of, so that they can take actionable steps? And so the system is built in 4 parts, just like the 4 parts of a common pinwheel. And so the first part is going through measuring your own pinwheel. How big is my lifestyle? How big is my pinwheel? What job do I have? Because that contributes to how big my pinwheel is, how much I might have to save. So it incorporates that as well. And in about 5 minutes, you can get a really good idea to see how big my pinwheel is. So no fancy budgeting or anything like that. Part
Mhm.
two jumps into now, okay, we have this energy coming in. What should I do with it? Because I need to build this financial battery. I can't give it all to my pinwheel. So, what are the different parts of the financial battery? What are the different cells? Where should I be directing this extra energy to? And how much am I saving? How much should I be saving? So, you get a good kind of managing the financial energy flow kind of part of it. Part three
Mhm.
then goes into, you're talking about renewable energy before. Part three goes into the solar panels. Those are the investments that we want to attach to the financial battery to help it grow and help it charge, so that even when we're using up the energy in the financial battery, when we're retired, our pinwheel keeps spinning and our battery's not going to run out, because the investments, the solar panels, are going to keep recharging that battery for us. Finally, part four is about protecting all this great stuff that we've now built. So there are different things that could happen, different storms that could come across down the way, and we want to make sure we're protecting against those. So if you think about kind of riding in a boat upstream, sometimes boats coming down at you, they don't have captains and you can't always get out of the way. So you want to make sure you're taking the right steps to kind of be in advance of that. So if something does happen in life, everything that you've built, this great pinwheel, this battery, these solar panels, they don't go down with the ship. So that's what people can kind of get from it. 4 simple steps to take them through this process, so they can have that confidence. Hey, this is how everything kind of comes together. This is why it's important. And here are simple steps that I can take to get myself in a better position.
Mhm. Well, certainly 4 very practical steps. I mean, I know you really can't start any journey without knowing where you're going. So the first step, the first phase of your book sounds like, all right, considering the fact that a lot of Americans don't have a budget, they don't have a clear idea of what they spend or what their finances are. I know that as a bankruptcy attorney, speaking with clients, it really is. And I was saying just the other day to a client, we go through what you're talking about. We gather everything together on the financial picture, and hopefully you're not doing it to a bankruptcy attorney. You're doing this way before that, uh, so that. But and they get in and says, all right, well, what's your cash flow? Not just are you from an income and expense standpoint able to pay a portion of your debt back? Or are you so insolvent that you can't pay any of it back? So that looks at the cash flow and says, all right, this is the net household income. This is how much your expenses are, and this is what, if anything, is left over. And not just for the analysis for the bankruptcy, but I say, look, this if you're deficit spending, and that's ultimately where we are where we get to in the bankruptcy petition preparation process, then that has to change, or your fresh start isn't going to last very long. So the second part of what I talk about with them is, all right, now you've got this budget, now you know what your cash flow is, now you know what you need to do to keep the ship on an even keel, and know that you're not deficit spending, that you're able to at least cover your expenses, or you have enough wind to spin your pinwheel, to continue that analogy. So you really have to gather everything together. What are your how much money is in the bank? What are your assets? How much debt do you have? Because then that first step, you need to know: do you have positive cash flow? Do you have debt that you need to repay? Where are you as far as your finances are concerned before you even get to step two, which is really creating your plan, right? So you look at step one, say, what do I need to do in step two? And could you tell us a little bit more about step two? I mean, like I said, people, they have to figure out their cash flow as far as whether they're spending beyond their means to begin with, and whether they have all of the components, emergency savings account, that sort of thing, and that
Mhm.
they're taking advantage of all the different long-term saving and retirement tools. What are some of the things that they may have to do in step two to get ready for step three and four?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I mean, overall, I apologize, Steve, because my goal is to have you have less clients for them to learn your step
That's
two
right.
before they
That's
get
the
to you.
purpose of this podcast, ironically enough.
But to answer your question directly, the step two would walk them through a big part of it is what arena of employment are you in? So if you're a teacher, your pinwheel gets put together much more differently than if you're in the matching arena where you're working for a company that has a 401k and a match. Like that's somebody saving for you for free. So kind of helping them identify where do I fall and how much do I even have to save? Because you'll see out there like, oh, you should save 20%. A teacher probably does not have to save 20% because their pension and their social security could very well cover the vast majority, if not all of their needs. So first identify, hey, how much do I probably have to save? And then calculate, well, how much am I saving now? And how much of a gap do I have there? And then when I identify, okay, I have this amount that I'm going to save, that I am saving, where should I put it? So I have the protection part of the financial battery. So that's your emergency fund, your short-term needs. So that's in a bank account, CDs, places where you can get to it quickly. Then you have the flexibility part of the cell. So those are your joint accounts, your individual investment accounts, pieces that are growing, that they're keeping pace with inflation, but you have access to them at any point in time. So whether it be college, early retirement, a home addition, whatever it might be, you have access to that money all the time, but it's in a location where it can still grow and keep pace with inflation. And finally, you have your last piece, your growth piece, and that's where all your retirement accounts go to, your Roth accounts, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people I work with, they have the first part and they might have some of the last part and they don't have anything in the middle. So it's really about, hey, being more cognizant of listing out, hey, here's everything I have. Here are all the assets I have, like you said before. Which cell do they fall into? And how do I make sure that I'm building out all the pieces in a way that makes sense for me? Because my goal is not for people just to have the biggest financial battery that they could possibly have. My goal is for them to save how much they need to save for where they're kind of working in life and to get to therefore where they need to be. Because if you come out and you say, hey, I'm saving 25% and it looks like I only need to save 15, great. Now you know that I can take an extra trip to Disney World or I can do whatever else that would make you happy now. So it's not just a book about getting a big financial battery and a really small financial pinwheel. It's about understanding where you are now, understanding where gaps might exist, or understanding that you might be already ahead of the curve so that you can enjoy more for today. But being just more intentional about understanding those relationships so you can take action today that benefits you better.
So you got step one where you gather everything together, and step two is where you start filling in the gaps, rebalancing things a little bit, saying, okay, I have enough wind for my pinwheel. And then you really have two different batteries because you have one that is sort of an boy, we're using a lot of metaphors here, uninterruptible power supply. The power goes out and you have some battery power that'll
Mm-hmm.
get you through, or you have a generator in your house and that'll get you through until the power comes back on. So you have sort of that short-term battery for your pinwheel. That's your if you get hit with a large medical expense or a car repair or things like that, your emergency fund that'll help you cover these unexpected expenses or an unexpected loss of income until you're back on track again and you can go back on regular wind power.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the long-term battery that's just charging over time so that once you retire, that pinwheel can keep spinning even when there's no wind. So
Right.
step two is sort of getting everything in place and balancing it out. Now, what was I know stage four, step four was protection. What was step three again?
So step three is where you're building out your investments. So going through how do I arrange my investments? Because whether it's the flexibility cell or it's the growth cell, understanding how you want your investment strategy to work, that's what's really important. I mean, we've had clients that come in and they say, hey, I've been saving the same amount as my coworkers, but I have like 1/30th of the amount saved up to retirement. How could that be? And it turns out all of their retirement savings were going into a stable value fund, which is just, AKA cash. And their money has just been sitting there, not keeping up with inflation for 35 years. We have other clients who they wanted to invest all in their individual company stocks. So where they worked, I work for the best company ever. I want to just pour money into those. And, we've had clients that had that mentality and we told them not to, but, they worked at Lehman Brothers and then they lost everything.
Oh,
So, it's about developing an investment strategy, developing solar panels that work for you long term. I say basically anything that you've ever seen in the movies, whether it's Boiler Room or Wall Street, you now have all the examples of what not to do and building out your own solar panels. Because if it's really entertaining for Hollywood, it's probably not a prudent strategy for you to be following yourself. So it's about how do you build those out and then also building out what people should expect. Investments are very scary for a lot of people because they don't know what to expect. They think, hey, I could lose everything. So it goes through a lot of the expectation components as well. Like, how often should I expect the market to go down 20%? How often should I expect the market to go down 10%? Because if you're investing for 30 years, you should expect the market to go down anywhere from 10 to 15 times, go down 10 to 10% or more, every 1 to 2 years it happens. So you need to know that in advance, because the worst thing you could do is say, oh my God, the world is falling. Let me pull my solar panels inside. Let me put them in the shed. And then when the sun comes back out, you miss the train and you can't, that train's gone forever. So it trying to help with expectations, because that's the part most people have the most trouble with. It's not, hey, I want to make money or I want to put money somewhere that'll help it grow. But you have to be prepared for these storms that are going to happen. You don't go outside after a thunderstorm and say, whew, thank God, that's the last one I'll ever see. Thunderstorms come, they go, and they come again. So you have to expect that kind of same mentality when you're doing investing.
absolutely. And I've talked about this with other guests where, people don't understand with the market, you haven't lost any money until you actually sell.
Right,
So they're scared by being scared of losing money, they get out of the market and then they actually do lose money.
right.
Instead of realizing, wait a minute, I don't need this money right now. So I haven't lost anything yet because it's just on paper, because I haven't taken the money and I don't need the money right now. So if the market's down, instead of getting out, you should be doubling down and getting in even more. And you say, wait a minute, you've been buying stocks or buying into a mutual fund at this price, and all of a sudden it's cheaper. Wait a minute, isn't that good news? Because now you can put more money in. Because even if you didn't say, I'm not going to panic, I'm not going to get it out of the market, I'm gonna wait until it recovers. Well, then okay, it recovers in 8 months, but you're in the same place you were 8 months ago. But if you had bought those stocks while they were on sale, you would have made even more money, because when the market comes back up, all those stocks that you bought at a cheap price are now worth a heck of a lot more. So it's
Yeah.
really an opportunity for huge growth and rate of return if you continue to stay in there, and if you've got 10, 20 years before you really need the money.
Yeah, so I guess two things off of that. One is there's a famous quote by Sir John Templeton, founder of the Franklin Templeton Funds, of the best time to invest is when there's blood in the streets. So yeah, when things are not looking their best, statistically, from what I've seen in different research, the most millionaires and billionaires are made during the worst of economic times, not the best. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity, like you had said. And then the second thing is that's why part two and three work together. Because
Mm.
if you need money in the short term, it's not invested. It's in the protection cell. It's invested in the bank and CDs. So when you have the money that you need for the new roof, it doesn't go down 20, 30% because it's not invested in that way. So that's why you want to pair those two pieces together, make sure that money that you have in the right cell is invested in the right way to go along with that, based on what is going to happen every 1 to 2 years, every 3 to 5 years, and have those expectations built in so that you can handle it emotionally in advance. It's kind of like if you're watching a movie and you don't really like scary movies. If someone says, okay, be careful, like this guy's going to jump out at you in the next scene, you don't get as scared because you know that it's coming. Same kind of thing with this. If you know every 5 years or so, there's going to be a 20% drop in the market on average historically, you're mentally prepared for that going forward. If you're going to be investing for a long time, you should expect this amount of downturns every so often, and you just get yourself prepared in advance for that.
And not only get yourself prepared in advance for it in terms of, hey, there are going to be some buying opportunities coming up soon. You know, taking the reverse view of it, it's not a bad thing, but a good thing. But also, as you get older and you're maybe 5, 6, 7 years out from retirement, then you have to start thinking about that a little differently, right? Because you're going to need the money sooner. You may not have the ability to ride it out. So maybe rebalancing or reconsidering your plan as as you approach retirement, right?
So that's a great point, Steve. So the last part of section 3, I have an exercise called the battery harvesting timeline. Because when
Mm-hmm.
people retire, what you have to remember is you're not using all your money on day one, right? So you retire at 65 and you want to live to 90 years old, that's 25 years. So while you don't want all of your money to be invested super aggressively, the money that you're going to use next year should not be invested super aggressively. The money that you're not going to use for 20 years still can be invested more aggressively if you're comfortable with that. And so it helps you break down all of your different accounts. And this is when I'm going to use this one. This is when I'm going to use this one. This is when I'm going to use this one. So you can literally see the timeline of it. Because when you say, hey, a young person could be aggressive, it's not because they're young. It's because they're not going to use it for 20 years or 30 years. So if you're 65 or you're 25, it doesn't matter. If you have a piece of your money that you're not going to touch for 20 years or 30 years, the same rules apply. So by breaking it up in that way, you can see it, because I see a lot of people, they make all their accounts really conservative when they retire. And now they might have a piece that they're not going to touch for 30 years that's kind of, underperforming where it maybe could, because they feel like everything has to be conservative day one, that when they hit retirement.
Mm-hmm. And different types of investments can play into that strategy. For example, if you have a pension in a 401k and you also put some money in a Roth IRA, well, that pension is going to give you a steady stream of income, whether it's through a pension or maybe an annuity.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have required minimum distributions on that 401k. So,
Correct. Yep.
all right, when I retire, I'm going to have this pension or annuity, and I'm going to have the required minimum distributions, and that's going to carry me for a while. But what I have as a hedge against inflation is I have that money in a Roth IRA, which I don't have to take out until I want to, and I won't be paying any taxes on it.
Correct.
So it's a hedge against inflation, and it's also a cushion at the end that can stretch your money longer if you're in danger of running out of that money from the 401k, even though it hopefully will continue to grow like a starfish. As you take the money out, the remainder continues to grow. So it's not straight arithmetic, this amount of money drawn out over 10 years, because it's going to grow. So you
Yeah.
have those different accounts that can work differently in your plan to help you go longer in retirement.
Yeah, because the RMD, the required minimum distribution, is not guaranteed, whereas the pension generally it's essentially a guaranteed payment to you. And so the RMD can run out. It's not it increases every year. So every year it's based on your age and the year-end value, so it can go up every year. And
Right.
so what they don't always tell you, or what people don't always know, is you don't have to take it all out and spend it all either. So if your RMD is 20,000, but you only need 10,000, take out the 10,000 that you need and take the other 10,000 that they make you take out, but reinvest it into a traditional, individual or joint investment account too. And that can help it, keep growing as well for you. So it has to come out of the IRA or the 401k, but that doesn't mean you can't reinvest into a traditional account the money that you don't need. And the relationship you mentioned, a pension. So I talk about how your battery is not just you, it's you
Mm.
and it's them. And everybody has a different ratio for that. So the them part of it is Social Security and pensions and things that they are guaranteeing and managing for you. The you part is what you have to worry about. If you think back to your great grandparents or grandparents, depending on how old you are, they didn't have to worry about the you part. They had a big pension, they had a big Social Security, they had a small pinwheel, they kind of just lived on what they had, and they were good with that. They didn't have to really worry about the you part of the battery at all. Nowadays, the you part is the biggest part. Social Security is not going to cover you. Most people don't get pensions. And so that's why financial advisors and self managing your finances, all this stuff became so important, because that you portion of your financial battery has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So unless
Mm.
you're a teacher where the them part is still covering 90 to 100% of your needs, depending on where you live and how big your pension is, that you part is what you have to really learn how to manage, how to break it out into those different components, the growth, flexibility, protection cell, and make sure you're making the right decisions when it comes to your investments so that it can grow big enough to take care of you down the road.
Mm. All right, so let's talk about this fourth step, which is protection, and it's something that people don't always think about. And I'm going to make an assumption here, at least to get the discussion going. I mean, it's a good part of that protection is insurance. You want to have life insurance so that at least early on in your years, and as your wealth grows and things like that, you're not necessarily going to need the income replacement portion of that life insurance. But as you're younger and working, you have that. If you own a home, make sure, or even an apartment with renter's insurance or homeowners insurance. So if a tree falls on your house, or if it burns down or gets torn apart in a tornado or whatever it is, horrible, you have that insurance to protect that asset. And the same thing with disability insurance. If you become disabled and can't work, or even if it's a temporary disability, I'm self-employed. I have a disability
Mhm.
insurance. Uh, so those are the things you're talking about, right? When it comes to uh, protecting, so that if you're not expending. For example, we talked about unexpected expenses. If you get into a car accident, you have enough auto insurance, hopefully, to cover the cost of that car, either it's repair or replacement, insurance to for any treatment of an injury, and you're not paying for that out of pocket. So you're preserving that. You don't have to dip into your emergent expenses. Same thing if a tree falls on your house or you become temporarily disabled, right? So
Mhm.
that and other, if there are other protections that people can engage in, let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, you hit on four of the five empty boats, as I call them in the book. So you have life insurance, disability insurance, you have property and casualty. So that's protecting your home, your auto. Long-term care is the one that I don't believe you mentioned in there.
Right.
And then the last one is just having your legal documents in order. So people hear about wills, they hear about power of attorneys, they hear about living wills with medical directives and things of that nature. Making sure you have those documents in order as well to protect yourself. So if you can't make your own decisions for you in a bad situation, you have the right people assigned to make those decisions for you. So yeah, handling those items, you basically not, hit on all of them. And it's the least fun part. Nobody wants to think about dying, becoming disabled, going into long-term healthcare facilities. Nobody wants to think about any of that. I understand that. At the same time, it's really important that we take those steps to make sure that our people that we care about are protected, because either it happens and people have no protections, and as their families are mourning them, they're thrown into this immediate, forced duress kind of situation, or we take the proper steps now and it's still going to suck. It's not going to be great if any of these terrible things happen, but now we'll have the pieces in place to make it as good as it can be when that situation may arise down the road.
Right, exactly. And you may have the disability insurance and the health insurance. So if you get laid up in the hospital for 2 months, you may have the health insurance to cover the treatment. And you may have the disability insurance to cover your expenses. But if you're not at your computer at home, or in front of your desk with your checkbook paying the bills, you have the money to pay the mortgage, but you can still lose the foreclosure because you're
Yeah.
not making the mortgage payments because you're laid up in the hospital. So that whole idea of the disability insurance, of the estate plan, where
Hmm.
you have a power of attorney where somebody can take over and make sure your bills get paid, make sure that the proper medical decisions are made, things like that. Not just in uh, in death, but in a temporary situation. People say, "Well, I'll have a will in case I die. I have minor children. It'll name a guardian." Well, what if you're a single parent and you're laid up in the hospital? Who takes care of the kids?
Yeah.
You're not dead, so that guardianship doesn't come into play because your will isn't active yet.
Hmm.
So, who becomes the guardian of the children in that instance? And people don't think about this stuff.
No, and I mean, when it comes to your working years, you're anywhere from 3 to 5 times more likely to become disabled than you are to die during your working years. So really disability and disability insurance and a power of attorney that helps in those situations, like you said, if you're laid up, those are statistically the most important documents to have, the most important protections to have, but they tend to play second fiddle to some other things. So I mean, it's all important, but some of the most important things often go unattended and untaken care of. Yeah.
Mhm. So we know what the book, how the book helps people,
Mhm.
and they're hearing about it, and suppose a listener says, "Yeah, Steve, Joe, that sounds nice, but there are lots of personal finance books out there that
There
might
are.
be
That's
able to
true.
help me." What is it about your book that makes it something that they should read as opposed to something by somebody else?
I mean, that's perfectly fair. I went when I part of my research, I was at the library, and there are a lot of finance books out there for sure. So I guess there's a couple main reasons or main things that stand out about this that make it a little bit unique. The first thing is that I'm actually a financial advisor, and I have been for 17 years. You'd be surprised how many books out there are written by self-proclaimed financial gurus. Some of the most prominent people out there in the financial space have never been a financial advisor before, have never worked with somebody one-on-one. And so that, strangely enough, is one of the differentiators from this compared to a lot of pieces out there. The second part is that it has a system that's simple and it allows you to actually follow it. A normal person can go through this, get value out of it, and take tangible steps forward. There's a lot of great budgeting books out there that I found, but they're very detailed, they're very intense, they're things that you have to do every day. And if you can't sustain it, even if it's a great idea, but if you can't sustain it and 2 to 3 months down the road or shorter than that, even you're getting frustrated, you're getting fed up. I don't want to do this. I don't like doing this. You're not going to do it. So you're not going to really get value out of it if you can't really keep up with it. And so the last part kind of goes along with that, I guess, is I have 30 courses where I'm actually teaching the pieces in the book. So it's not
Mhm.
just reading it, you can actually hear me explain it. You can see me walk through the concepts, and it comes with an Excel calculation sheet that I custom built that allows you to do all of the math that's in the book, which isn't overly substantial, but it allows you to do all of it for you, and you get to take that with you. So that's something that can grow with you. So you get a new job, or you make more income, or you decide you have a different goal in life and you want to do something else. It's something that can help you and make tangible steps going forward in accompanying the book. Because at least I've read great books and it's like, oh, that's a great idea. And then I do it for a couple months. And then 5 years later, I come across the book again. And I'm like, oh, I should have been doing that. I forgot about all that stuff. So having additional pieces that go along with it that you can keep with you and stay current and continue taking actionable steps is something that I really haven't seen, at least from what I've come across for other financial books out there.
Mhm. So I guess the next question is, whenever you have a goal or an objective you want to achieve, you want it to be measurable, and you need to be able to determine whether you've succeeded.
Mhm.
In measuring that, I'm reading a business book called Measure What Matters, and it talks about what he says, what he calls OKRs, objectives and key results. So, what do you see as those key results? What are the indicators that people have gotten out of the book? What you want them to get out of the book?
So
So, if you were to overhear people talking about your book, what would you want them to be saying about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I like about how it's structured is that you can go as deeper as you want into it. So, if you want just to have a higher level overview of how these major components kind of connect together, you can read through it and get that from it. If you really want to dive deeper into it and calculate, go through all the different calculation sheets and figure out how much you're spending, how much you're saving, how everything ties together, you can go really deep into it as well. And so I like that flexibility that comes with it, and it does so, though, in a simple way. So every part has anywhere from 2 to 4 exercises that take 5 to 10 minutes each. So, okay, I can calculate how much I'm living on, how big my pinwheel is in 5 minutes. Great. Like that alone for some people would be determined as like, that's a success. Like I didn't know that before. That's a success right there. Then I calculate my savings rate. Then I see what track I am, compared for my age and my employment for retirement. So you add up all these like little 5 to 10 minute exercises, and you get to the end of the book and you look back and you've climbed like 3 flights of stairs, but it didn't feel like climbing 3 flights of stairs. And now you're at the top of the staircase and you have these different key indicators that have come together for you. You can say, like, this is what I'm spending. This is how much I'm saving. this is how much I have in each one of my different battery cells. You can walk away with these tangible numbers that help you say, I've actually made progress. It's not just theoretical. It can be as deep and detailed as you want it to be.
Great. Well, I'm sure that we talked earlier about what you do and who the book is for, and that you offer more than just what people can find in the book. I'm sure there you say they can go as deep as they want. I'm sure they can go even deeper beyond that book, right? There are other things you can do for people. So if people want to go beyond that book and say, "Hey, I want more. I've gone in as deep as the book's going to take me." How much deeper can you take them and how can you help them?
So, I mean, really, the courses and the online resources to me I can't stress enough how important that is. So, for my practice, if somebody were to come to me and say, I want a one-time financial plan, Joe, I just want to get a plan for, for today based on my situation, I would not work with them. And the reason is because it would be a complete waste of their money. If they want a financial plan for this snapshot, this picture of today, well, next year when their income changes, the plan is useless. Next year when their goal changes, the plan is useless. So you need something that can grow with you, something that you can continue to use to make changes in the future. And so that's where those online resources come into play, where that allows you to continue with the process. So once a year, you go through your annual Pinwheel review to update your income, see how much you're saving. Okay, I'm making 10% more income now. Am I saving 10% more? Am I having certain supercharging opportunities that are coming down the road? Maybe my car is about to be paid off. Maybe my kids are about to come out of daycare. What are these different opportunities that I've listed and organized within the structure of what is provided in the financial pinwheel? So I know to jump on that opportunity. I have it written down. So those are the things that you want to do. You want a tool that can grow with you and continue to help you make positive, impactful decisions for yourself, because your finances and your life, they're not going to stay still. They're not static. You need something that is active and mobile that can grow with you. So the book is great. It gives you lots of information, but the courses and the tools and the calculators online, that's what you can really keep with you and see that continued progress and that continued growth to make good changes and good actions for yourself going forward as well.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye on it. This is not, and you make a good point. None of this is set it and forget it. And I think that that's what you're talking about. The person just wants to come in and get a plan and that's it. And how much would you charge me for
Mhm.
that? They're having a set it and forget it mentality. And that's you can't do that in this area because as you every year or 2 years or whatever, however often you recommend people look at this, they want to make sure, am I is there any lifestyle creep going on?
Mhm.
I've gotten a couple raises, but where's the money going? Where have I been spending it? How do I need to adjust my plan appropriately with this increase in income and better financial status?
Yeah,
So
no, 100%.
So if people want to go further than this and really have you work with them to make sure their pinwheel keeps spinning over the years, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way to connect with me regarding the financial pinwheel is on Instagram. So joe.oakley.finance. Update that on a regular basis. A great way to connect and go through all these concepts that I've talked about today, written about, to stay current with all that and the things going forward.
And I'll leave those. You're also on LinkedIn, and
Correct.
I'll
Yep.
put that stuff in the show notes, the socials, as well as links on how to get the book from
Mm-hmm.
Amazon and some more information about the book on your website.
Awesome.
So, thanks for coming on the show again, Joe. I'm sure we talked before I hit record about. I think we didn't get to everything in episode 144, so I may be bringing you back to finish that topic and that discussion. But in the meantime, thanks for coming on the show and thanks for introducing our listeners to their financial pinwheel.
Thanks very much, Steve. I know that all these episodes take business away from you, so you're a martyr in the space, uh, sharing all this with everybody. But no, I appreciate being on with you today. It's always a great conversation when we talk, and I appreciate you trying to my goal again is to help 100,000 middle class families out there. So giving me space to try to accomplish that goal and help people out there is just fantastic. So I really appreciate that too.
All right, Joe. Have a good week.
You too, Steve. Take care.